We know that in many parts of the world, men have, the role of the provider. And so if they lose their job and there's no money, then they can become very suicidal. When the unemployment rate goes up, suicide rates also follow among men. The more suicide attempts amongst women, but more men die from suicide.
Why do we have these higher proportion of rates of suicide amongst men than women? Today, we want to have a conversation to explore this serious issue. What are the reasons behind this, and how can this situation be improved? My guest today is a physician specializing in psychiatry. He is a fellow, Royal Society of Medicine, and a distinguished member of the Royal College of Psychiatrists. In 2019, he published a report titled On Responsible Media Reporting of Suicide. He is also a philosopher, priest, and a poet. He is indeed a man of many parts and talents. I present to you Dr. Ayo Amiola. You're welcome, Dr. Ayo. Hope you're well.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for inviting me here.
Thank you so much. It's good to have you on this podcast today. You know, as I've mentioned in my introduction, today what we want to deal with is the issue of the disproportionate rate of suicide amongst men compared to women. So now I just wanted to ask you, as we go into this conversation, what is really, why do we have these higher proportion of rates of suicide amongst men than women?
Yes, thank you very much. That's a very interesting question you've asked. And in almost every part of the world, this disparity has been seen that, for example, in the UK, between 3 to 4 times higher, the rate of suicide in men compared to women. In other parts of the world, it's the same disparity we see. And this is surprising because we know that women attempt suicide more.
Okay.
Yeah, so the more suicide attempts amongst women, but more men die from suicide.
All right.
So that's always important to note that the women may attempt suicide more, but men will die from suicide. And many factors are responsible.
Okay.
Some of these factors are intuitive. We can readily think about them. Socioeconomic factors, for example. So we know that in many parts of the world, men have, the role of the provider. And so if they lose their job and there's no money, then they can become very suicidal. But that happens to everyone, both men and women. The reason why men would die is often because of the lethality of the instrument they use to kill themselves.
Okay.
So for example, in places like the US where people have access to guns and firearms, that's very lethal. Put a gun to your head and pull the trigger.
Wow.
There's really little anyone can do after that.
That's true. You're
I've
right.
seen patients, for example, who ingested, acids. In fact, one of them only survived due to the quality of the healthcare he could get in the UK. If it was in other parts of the world, he would have died.
That would have been it.
So those are some of the reasons. It's really the lethality of the instrument that men use. And then even if people want to intervene, it's almost always a bit too late for any intervention to be successful.
Wow. So you're saying that the social economic factors is one of the biggest factors, or one of the big factors why men, why people actually attempt suicide.
Yes.
And of course, the fact that men use maybe more lethal weapons or means.
Yes.
Okay. So, but apart from these two factors, are there any other factors that could be responsible, for the rate of suicide?
Yes. Another important thing is mental illness, particularly depression. And again, it's a paradox because more women are diagnosed with depressive illnesses than men. Okay. But the challenge is when a man has a depressive illness, men struggle to express how they feel. There's this alexithymia. In fact, it's that the man himself cannot identify, cannot recognize his low mood. He has no words to express it. He doesn't even know anything is wrong. And I'm sure I mentioned this to you before. I've had some patients, I'll talk about 2 particularly. The first was a young man in his 30s who was into business, and then someone scammed him and he lost a lot of money. And then he came to the clinic because the family members saw he was suicidal. And then while I was speaking with him, it was depressed, clinically depressed. And then when we told him, well, we think, your mood, how would you describe your mood? It was like, well, I'm fine.
Wow.
Even though he was clearly depressed. And when we told him that was the diagnosis, he struggled to accept that he was really depressed. The other patient I saw was more middle-aged, and he had Parkinson's disease, and he had gone to see the neurologist, who then noticed he was depressed and referred to psychiatry. And when we saw him and we were asking again about his mood, he said, I'm very happy. I wake up in the morning. He's a pastor, interestingly. I read my
Wow.
Bible. I worship God. But while he was telling us that, he was bawling like a child. He was literally in tears. But he couldn't even identify that he was low in mood. And that is not unusual for men.
Wow.
Research has shown that for many men who are depressed, they have no words to describe that feeling. And that's another reason why, if they then feel that things are hopeless, there is no future, then they could become very impulsive and then attempt to end their lives.
Wow. It's interesting, though, Dr. Ayo, that you mentioned the issue of the gentleman that was scammed, because I've actually been a victim of that before.
Well, I'm
I've had
sorry to
a similar experience, and I will tell you, it wasn't a good place to be. You understand? And this happened not too long ago, actually. You understand? I also was in a situation whereby I lost my job. You understand? And there was that pressure to perform, pressure to provide, pressure to just be the man in the house and things like that. And the little money, some of the savings I had and I kept aside, I just thought I saw this opportunity, like an investment opportunity. And I put my money into it only to realize that it was a scam.
Yeah.
Prior to that time, things were already quite, stressful, within me. Now that coming on top, it was a dark period. In fairness, I felt like just ending it. I felt like ending it completely. And one of the things that actually helped me was the fact that I was able to open up to my wife.
Yeah.
You understand? Especially when this scam thing happened. All through the first day, I just kept it to myself. But the second day, I had to open up to her. And of course, she was quite livid. But opening up to her was actually really helpful. And and I guess that's probably one of the situations. It seems as if men find it difficult to open up when issues are happening in their lives.
Yes, you've talked upon many important themes. I'll start with what the last thing you said, which is difficulty even discussing your problems. So we know again that men have poor health-seeking behavior, and that generalizes to other things. So a man would struggle to tell others he needs help. Okay. Again, socioculturally, you should be a man up.
Yeah.
So
that's
asking
it.
for help in many cultures is seen as a sign of weakness, whereas it's really a sign of strength that you don't have what you need and someone else can provide it for you, and we've even identified that. So really, it's a strength, but sometimes most people don't realize that.
It's a strength. When you say it's a strength, do you mean the ability to open up or just keeping it to yourself?
No, the ability to open up,
Okay.
to ask for help, is a strength.
All right.
Yeah.
But culturally, we feel it's a weakness, though.
Exactly, yeah. So culturally, it's seen as a weakness. You have to have it all together, but no one has it all together. So what you mentioned about opening up, and also about your wife, again, because we know that the interaction that people have with family members is protective against suicide. Yeah, so suicide rates, when we check, we see that it's highest among those who are widowed, followed by those who are divorced, followed by those who are single, and then those who are married with children. So people who are married with children have a lower rate.
Can you say that again? It is higher amongst those who are widowed,
divorced, single, and then married with children. So people who are married with children have the lowest rate amongst these categories. Yeah. And
so being married is already a protective,
factor,
factor, so to speak.
Yes,
okay, I get you.
It is. And in fact, in my own work, in my practice, when people come and say, well, I feel quite low, but I'm not going to act on it. And you say, why? Many people will say, well, it's because of my family, my wife, my husband, my children. So for many people, we know that clinically, and also research has shown. So having someone, a trusted order that you can speak with and express how you feel to, we know is protective. Because you also touched on an important point, which is hopelessness. Most people who end up dying by suicide, do that because they come to a point where they feel things are hopeless. Things will never change. There is no future. There is no hope. And then what's the point? And we can all imagine, if you ever get to such a point, it becomes very easy to end it all. But speaking to some other person, a trusted person who can take that on board and say, well, but all things are not hopeless. There's still a way out of this. There's a future. All of that is important. So thank you for telling us about your own experience, because many people go through these difficult times, but having someone you can speak with really is very helpful.
Yeah, that's what I actually realized as well. And that's actually one of the things that prompted me to start these podcast, because what I felt was, if I've been a pastor for a while, I encourage people, counsel people. And I felt, if I could feel that low and I felt that bad and I felt like, what, I just want to end it all. It's better not to be here again. I just felt, if I could feel like that, how are folks feeling? Some other men out there, you understand? In my introduction, I talked about I mentioned the fact that I attended a seminar actually in 2014. And that was the first time I became aware of the statistics that men, when you talk about complete suicides, the numbers of men who go through suicides and, complete it are 3 times more than women. And I realized that, wow, that's a big statistics, and that's a big issue. I remember then I had a conversation with my pastor then. He's gone home to be with the Lord now. And that this is a conversation that we should have. And unfortunately, we didn't get around to having a workshop or a seminar or an event just to be able to deal with it. You understand? But when I went through my own dark stage, I would say I remembered that statistics. And I felt, that, what? This is a bad state. I need to speak to someone. And that really was helpful. So I reckon this information being out as well is, I think it's necessary.
It is. And thankfully, now, the stigma around suicide is reducing. And you talked about...
Because that's a big one, stigma.
Yeah. Speaking with your pastor. Because in faith spaces... there are 2 issues I want to point out. First is that, again, we know that belonging to a faith community is protective.
Okay.
It's protective against depression and even against suicide. So we know that. But also, people in faith spaces don't want to talk about suicide because they don't want to normalize it. They feel if they say, well, let's talk about suicide today, everyone who is already suicidal will feel, well, that is a license to end their own life. So they're always very... a bit reticent to talk about it.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I remembered when I had that conversation with my pastor, what he said was, what, there are certain, and in fairness to him, the church was going through certain things, and, as a pastor, you're more like a father, you have to protect your flock. So, and he said, what, we need to bring positive things.
Yeah.
To the people, and and that's why we left it. Okay, we want to. This could be a kind of depressing information or depressing news, so we don't want to talk about it. Yeah. You understand? So it's quite interesting that you should now mention that. Okay, but should it be like that though?
Yeah, I think it is how we discuss it. That's what matters. We can't not talk about it, but there's a right way of talking about suicide.
Okay.
Now, the challenge is that the pastor is right in that they feel, well, we want to be positive. Okay, but the truth is that people most likely in the church or people who have friends or family members who are already suicidal. And now when it is talked about, then the shame around it, the stigma is lost, and they are more likely to open up and say, well, this is what I'm going through, and how do I seek help? Okay. So that is why it is important to talk about it. Again, we know that it doesn't suggest it to people. Talking about suicide, if someone is not suicidal, they wouldn't suddenly become suicidal because it was mentioned. But those who are already suicidal, when it is talked about, feel more able to talk about their own difficulties and access the help that they need. So that's why in faith spaces it is very important that we don't keep these things under wraps, and as much as possible let people know that these are valid experiences people go through. Most of us would feel suicidal if we have a major life event. So it doesn't mean your faith is little, or maybe you're not really a Christian, or maybe you've lost your faith in God. These are natural responses to the stress of life, and it's important to talk about them.
Wow. Thank you very much for shedding more light into that. When we were having a conversation the other time, you also mentioned the fact that at times that religion could also be a factor to suicide at times, that in some environments or some culture, religious cultures, that people they actually have cases of underreported suicide.
Yes.
Do you want to say a bit more about that?
So the evidence around suicide shows that in some parts of the world they have very low suicide rates. And then, in fact, the very first study on suicide done in the 1800s by a sociologist showed that Durkheim was his name, that Roman Catholic communities have a lower prevalence of suicide compared to Protestant communities.
Okay.
And so people are not really sure. Some agree, some research shows that yes, religion itself is protective, and it doesn't matter what religion, but belonging to a religious community, that access you have to sociocultural support, the fact that you can go to your faith leader and say, look, I need help. Also the fact that they can provide practical help, to meet your needs. Okay. So all of those things we know it's protective. And also the fact that you are committed yourself to the values of the religion, for example, the Christian faith, where life is seen as sacred, and you are committed to that, and you have other people who are also committed to that. So that is true. What is also true is that in some places, because of the fact that we say no to suicide, when people actually are suicidal or they die from suicide, we don't report it. We keep it quiet. And then we say, well, they just slept and they never woke up. Yes. And so when you're looking at the statistics, you see that it's
it's more like we want to protect the community, or maybe want to protect the family. It's a stigma.
It's a stigma.
This has brought shame to the family, so let's cover it up.
Yes.
Okay.
And I've experienced that myself. I had a colleague who lost a friend to suicide. And then when I was, speaking with them, they said, well, I can't really tell anyone. He died, he killed himself because the family doesn't want anyone to know. So this is real. It happens that people feel stigmatized, that their loved one died from suicide. So generally in the statistics now at a population level, then we will have lower prevalence of suicide. But it's not a real data. It is artifactual, which means that the suicide verdict is not given to the coroner cannot say this is suicide, and they just say, well, we don't know why they died. So
unknown causes.
The cause is unknown. Yes. So those are two things to always keep in mind. We know religion is protective, yes, but at the same time, in some places the suicide rates are lower because people actually don't report the suicide.
Okay, but what about other instances where folks, due to religious reasons, have decided to do things, some radical things, like taking their own lives or the lives of other people?
Yes, that's very interesting you mentioned that, because even in the Christian tradition, there were two groups known for that in the patristic era, very long ago, AD 100, between AD 100 AD 500 in North Africa. So they felt that if you die by suicide, you're going to heaven. If you die, you're going to heaven. Okay, so they sought to be martyrs. They sought to be killed for their faith. So you see, some of them would jump from heights. They would go into temples and cause a ruckus so the pagans would kill them, So there were such people, but they were not the mainstream. They were just a sect. And then again, people who maybe suicide bombers. Some people would argue and say, well, that is not really their faith, but they've been radicalized. But that element of, death is a pathway to bliss. Is very important. And for people who feel deprived, who feel life has been difficult, who just want to do one important thing for their family, if they are told that, well, this is a way for you to, get eternal bliss and for everything to work out, they're more likely to buy into such ideologies.
Thank you very much for speaking to that. Yeah. Earlier on, you said something about, like the hierarchy of, if I can put it like that, of exposure to, should I say, depression. And you mentioned those who are divorced, those who are, maybe lonely, widowed, and things like that. Now, the seminar that I said I attended some years ago, it was also mentioned there that people who are in their middle ages, mid-aged men, they actually tend to be more suicidal than maybe some other category of people. And I just wanted you, if you can say a bit more, speak a bit more into that. Why is that the case? You'll expect that, as a middle-aged person, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, there should be some experience. Why is it that it is at that age that some folks now feel, you know what? Maybe life is no longer worth living.
Yeah. So clinically, we know that fact. And again, personally in clinic, if I see someone, a man, middle-aged, and they express suicidal thoughts, my radar is very high, because most likely they're going to kill themselves. And those type of men, they're not doing this impulsively. They will plan it, and then they will ensure it actually happens.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's the risk is very high in mid-aged men, especially those who have lost their jobs also. So again, there's some socioeconomic component to it. The loss of a role. Again, some who are perhaps divorced. Again, we know that when people divorce, between 12 to 18 months after, suicide rates go up. Yeah. We also know when people lose their jobs on a population level, when the unemployment rate goes up, suicide rates also follow among men. Yeah. So, but for an individual person, it's always difficult to say why this particular person is suicidal. But for a group, we can think of things like, even mental illnesses like depression, what you talked about, loneliness, the loss of a social role. Another important factor is alcohol use.
Okay.
Yes. So now in some parts of Europe, alcohol use is normal. They take lots of wine with their food. That is good. That would not increase suicide rates. But things like vodka, with very high alcohol content, people who do a lot of binge drinking, who get intoxicated from time to time, the rates of suicide is also very high.
Well, is that, you'll expect that, okay, with the use of alcohol, it makes you feel happy, isn't it? It should reduce your depression.
Yeah.
You understand? So why is it now leading to suicide? Is it more of suicide or accidental death?
So it's both.
Okay.
So some people may feel suicidal, but they didn't really want to kill themselves. But then they get drunk, and then maybe they're in the bath, and then they're intoxicated, and then they drown.
Okay.
So that happens, which is accidental. But also we know that alcohol use would cause psychosocial difficulties. Many people will lose their jobs because of alcohol use, lose the family break up, the children don't want to interact with the dad because he's always drunk, he has no job, he's lost his house, the landlord has asked him to leave.
Wow.
So all of those psychosocial factors would predispose someone to suicide, but also the biological effect. So someone may then have chronic liver disease, and then they feel, well, what is the point?
I see.
I'm going to die anyway, so why not do it now?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for speaking into that. Wow. And talking about loneliness, I have come to realize that it seems as if women are able to manage it as they grow older, especially, those who have kids, than men, when they get to their middle age. It seems like they get separated, the gap between the father and the children seem to grow wider as they grow older. So is this one of the factors as well?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because I have two little children myself, and I hope that doesn't happen when I get to my middle age, that, the interaction becomes very poor. But it's quite complex, But I think, again, because many men traditionally may not even spend time with the children while they're growing up, whether because they're working or simply because it's not what men do. Men don't sit around asking tell me about your friends. So it's a gradual thing. If we're thinking along those lines, that when the children now become adults, they don't feel that they have anything to discuss with their dads. All the while, dad was just the ATM. But now I have my own money. So what do we talk? So some people will say that is why, but it's a very complex thing. And personally, I don't know. I think there are many factors that contribute to that widening. Again, it could be a generational gap. That the things that interested the dad is not what interests the children now, and then it's difficult to bridge that generation gap. I suppose that could also be a factor for that.
In cultures like the African culture, when children become independent and they start their own family, the mothers are the ones that tend to go support their kids. You understand? I remember my own mom and things like that. And it's always, when we had our children, it's always, we share the care, the taking care of the grandchildren is always shared between my mom and my mother-in-law. There was never a time we ever thought of bringing my dad or my father-in-law. It never happened. Something interesting actually happened. There was a time that my mother-in-law wanted to come and my father-in-law said, well, I have to come as well. And we just thought, let me forget it. But I guess that's it, because I just thought, what am I going to be discussing with this man? God have mercy. I hope I don't have the same experience when I get to that stage as well. But it is well. Now, talking about the factors, one major, one of the things that I also wanted to speak into is the support for men. Or for the support for anyone going through this dark stage or something like that. But it is believed that there is a massive disparity in support for men compared to women. It seems like the system supports women more when they are going through these issues than when a man comes out and cries that, this is what I'm going through.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, but it's getting better. There are a lot of initiatives now that are talking about and providing help for men who are going through difficulties, men who have mental illnesses. For example, there's Men's Shed. We've read about that.
Men's Shed.
Yeah, where men can, and they have hubs in different communities where men can get together, do the things men love to do, build stuff, DIY stuff, and then just engage and talk about the difficulties that they have. Also, for people who struggle with, say, alcohol use, so Alcoholics Anonymous, this has no gender disparity. Anyone can access help from that. Also, the NHS does not discriminate based on your gender. So anyone who is struggling, who contacts their GP or 111 will get the help they need. But I suppose what you're talking about is as a culture, socioculturally, as a society, And I again think it's due to the fact that people feel men have it all together, and so they don't need any help. Whereas I feel women would almost always talk about their difficulties. if you see two women get together, immediately they're talking about how difficult life is with raising children and stuff. Whereas men will just say, "Guy, how far? How are you?" And that's it. And then back to their phones.
That's
Or
true.
just talking about the weather or or football.
Yeah.
So
I think it's more football than weather.
yeah, so I think women would readily say, "Look, we need help," and perhaps can advocate better for the kind of services that they need, whereas men just feel, well, it's fine, things will get better. If it doesn't get better, then I will just suck it up. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for, shedding light into all these factors. You understand? We've heard about the social cultural factors and the psychological factors and things like that. However, let's just pick it, the sociocultural factor on its own. How can a man improve his state, especially if a man is going through a situation and he knows and he feels that, yeah, this is, I feel really quite bad and I want to end it all. And let's say someone is listening to you now. What can he do at this point to improve his state?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say to such a person is that the sense of hopelessness that they feel is a valid emotion, is a valid feeling, but it's not the truth. Things are not always as hopeless as they seem. But in the moment, it will feel like there is no hope, but really there is hope. So that's the first thing I want to say to that person. The other thing I want to say is to seek for help. Talk to someone. Talk to a trusted order. Yeah, most of us have people like that in our lives: spouses, maybe siblings, maybe parents, or maybe a coach or a pastor or a line manager at work. But speak to someone about it. And if there's absolutely no one around you, call 111 if you're in the UK. If you're in another part of the world, contact the emergency services. And in fact, if anyone goes on Google now and say, "I'm feeling suicidal," almost immediately there will be lots of numbers and resources that they can get in touch with to get help. The Samaritans, for example, in the UK, Calm, which is about campaign against living miserably. They have support for that. Shout. Some of these services you can even just send a text if you don't want to call, and then they will try as much as possible to support the person. And I think you would ask these also, but perhaps I should mention briefly now that if you have anyone around who is feeling suicidal, the gift of presence is very important.
Okay.
Just knowing that people know that there's someone there I can talk with. Maybe not necessarily acting like an amateur counselor. You don't have to say, "Well, I'm not medically trained. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist." Just being there, that gift of presence is very important.
Wow. Thank you very much. Because of our time, I would have loved you to drill a bit more into this, but I believe that we will be having you back in the studio whereby you'll be able to speak more into these issues and possibly, suicide intervention, how to actually deal with it. Because what we've just done today was talking about,
overview,
what causes it, but we'd like to know a bit more about how to deal with it as well. You understand? But thank you so much, Dr. Ayo, for being here with us today, on this podcast. Thank you so much. And I hope that the next time we call, you'll be able to, honor our invitation.
Of course.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
very happy to.
Thank you. We really appreciate you. Fantastic. If you have enjoyed or gained anything from this podcast, we'll appreciate it if you can click on like and also follow us on any of our social media handles. We'll also like to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can be notified every time we drop new episodes. Thank you for being a part of this podcast today. I remain your host, Deji Oke.